Hello, my name is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to talk to you about atheism. It's rather been the theme of the last few videos of mine because I have a lot of material, and it will probably be a theme of next week's videos too, since I don't want to overload the channel with too many uploads. Not while it's this channel. I will, however, note that I am creating new channels. I should have already introduced one, but I'm planning on introducing it next week because of technical difficulties. Not with my computer, surprisingly, but when I tried creating a new Gaggle account so that I could create my new Tube.OU channel, it went smoothly until it sent a verification code to my email, which was a new email I had just created specifically for this occasion. What is bizarre about it is, I never got the verification code and could never verify, so I was never able to create my Gaggle account. I, of course, do not have internet access every day, so I was forced to temporarily abandon the project while I returned to the house where I am residing. And I have decided, as with this channel, the other one will be using the Julian calendar. That way I can still open it on All Saints' Day, just the Old Saints' Day according to the old Julian calendar and not the modern calendar. Though this was not my intention. Nevertheless, the last time I was online, I spoke to 3 or 4 different atheists who, on the one hand, said nothing original and nothing new. They simply repeated the dogmas of the holy religion of atheism. And for those who don't know, the holy religion of atheism is not me calling a mere lack of belief in a god a religion. Rather, I got tired of atheists saying that I'm calling atheism a religion. Whenever I said that being an atheist did not mean you were not religious, that everyone is actually religious, that religion is a philosophical understanding of the world around us, and that there are atheistic religions like secular humanism, they always rejected my explanation and just said I called atheism a religion, made fun of me, and of course repeated the bits about how atheism is not a religion, atheism is a lack of belief in a god, atheism is a religion like bald is a hair color. Atheism is a religion like not playing sports is a sport. Atheism is a religion like not collecting stamps is a hobby, etc., etc., etc. And of course, if I pointed out that my actual statement was not that atheism is a religion, but that being an atheist does not mean you are not religious and that there are atheistic religions, then I was just ridiculed further, since I called atheism a religion and then denied calling it a religion, outing me as a liar as much as an idiot and a lunatic. And that is precisely how atheists argue. They don't really listen to what it is you're actually saying, so much as they simply ridicule you for it. And I was reminded of that whilst commenting to an atheist on the Tube.OU. Because I pointed out that Jesus being the Messiah is not so ridiculous, and he actually did fulfill all of the prophecies about Messiah, if you understood them correctly. I'm not going into details about them here. And this includes the one which is used to discredit Jesus because he was actually a false prophet and was nothing more than a failed apocalyptic prophet, as the divine prophet Bart Ehrman most wholly decreed. And that is the prophecy in the Olivet Discourse, where his disciples ask him when the end times and his second coming would be, and he gave them a lot of signs about it, with the sun and moon and stars not giving their light, things falling from heaven, persecution and all that, leading up to him saying, this generation shall not pass away until they see these things happen. And of course, this makes it a false prophecy, since Jesus' second coming did not happen within the lifetime of the disciples. The problem with this is that the prophecy was not about the end times and the second coming. The actual prophecy is about the destruction of the temple, Jesus being revealed to be the Messiah, and building his kingdom. Now, this last part, the building of Christ's kingdom, may prove that it actually is about the second coming. After all, Jesus didn't build his kingdom on earth during the lifetime of the disciples. That kingdom, according to Christian beliefs, will be built upon his second coming. That Jesus, when he returns, will build his kingdom finally at last. And therein lies the misunderstanding of this prophecy. You see, historically, no Christian associated the second coming of Jesus with the creation of his kingdom. We have no historical sources, or at least none that I am aware of, before the modern era, which began in the 1500s, of anyone believing that when Jesus returned to earth, it will be to build a kingdom and to reign in that kingdom for 1,000 years. Looking to the prophecy that is found in the Olivet Discourse, which is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Rather, it was always understood that the church was the kingdom of Christ, and that it already existed and is already on earth. You see, I explained within my post that the prophecy that supposedly proves Jesus was a false prophet because it didn't happen, actually did happen. When the disciples came to celebrate Passover in Jerusalem, they beheld the temple and told Jesus, look how beautiful and majestic the temple is, Lord. Look how glorious it is. And then Jesus told them that the temple would be destroyed, not one stone would be left unturned. Their response to that was to ask Jesus, quoting from Matthew chapter 24, verse 3. And he sat upon the Mount of Olives. His disciples came unto him secretly, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the token of thy coming, and of the end of the world? It is this verse that is used primarily to prove that Jesus was the false prophet. He's very clearly talking about the end of the world. It even says that, the end of the world. The problem is that in the original Greek, the word is aeon, which means age. This is why modern Bibles actually say end of the age instead of end of the world. And to be fair to older translations, the word world did not really mean the entire planet like we think of it as. Those of us in America, for instance, either North or South America, the continents, are in land that was once called the New World. And they weren't being figurative with that. They actually saw it as a new world. The word world didn't start becoming synonymous with the entire planet until much later, around the late early 1700s, and didn't become, for the most part, the default meaning of the word world until around the mid-18th to early 19th century. When older translations produced in the 17th century or earlier talk about the world, they're not necessarily speaking of the entire planet. And they might be talking about a regional landmass, or they could be talking about a period of time. And we still sometimes at least figuratively speak this way about how when someone died, it was the end of my world, and things like that. And that's much closer to what was intended in the older Bible translations, like the Bishop's Bible that I was quoting from, or the Authorized Version, which is also known as the King James Version. Even if this wasn't so, though, it is indisputable that the Greek word that is used is aeon, meaning age. So the disciples weren't really asking Jesus, when will the world come to an end? They were asking him when the age would come to an end. And the age they were speaking of was their own age, the age they were in, the age of the temple, the age when the Romans reigned supreme. They thought that at the conclusion of the age they were in, a new messianic age would begin. But you may counter, they didn't just ask that, they also asked Jesus, when will your second coming be? Read the verse again. It clearly has them ask Jesus when the second coming would be. Here's the verse. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, his disciples came unto him secretly, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be, and what shall be the token of thy coming, and of the end of the world? There it is, what shall be the token of thy coming? They are talking about the second coming, the parousia. And in this case, the Greek word parousia is used. However, the Greek word parousia just means coming. It doesn't necessarily mean his second coming. And it really doesn't mean the second coming here either. When the disciples asked Jesus when would be a sign of his coming, they were referring to when he would be revealed as the Messiah, claim his people, claim his kingdom, conquer and vanquish their enemies, and bring about that new messianic age. They were not talking about his second coming. And we know that because even though we take for granted that when Jesus ascended to heaven, he promised to come back, and that it is an integral part of the Christian belief system that Jesus promised there would be a second coming, we should keep in mind that the disciples asking Jesus this aren't actually Christians, they're Jews. And we should also keep in mind that they asked him, when will these things come to pass? When will be the sign of thy coming? About 2 to 2.5 years before Jesus was crucified. This is important because Jesus has yet to tell them he's going to have a second coming. As far as the disciples are concerned, Jesus will be revealed to be the Messiah, take up a sword, build an army, and defeat the Romans and build his kingdom on earth. They have no concept of Jesus returning to heaven, promising to return. They have no concept of there being a second coming. So why are they asking Jesus when his second coming would be? Well, the answer is they're not. They're asking him when he will be revealed to be the Messiah, when he will come into power, when he will come into his kingdom. They are not asking him when his second coming would be, because they have no concept of there being a second coming at this time. The prophecy is, of course, already fulfilled. Everything that Jesus promised has already happened. Not necessarily in the same order that people expected it, but it did happen. Jesus was praised and acclaimed as the King at Palm Sunday. Jesus atoned for the sins of his people at the crucifixion, and conquered sin and death at his resurrection, a part that atheists generally ignore. This proved that he was indeed the Christ, the Son of the living God, the Messiah that had been long awaited. He had vanquished the greatest enemy of all, sin and death. He then ascended to heaven, where we can see him come in the clouds, in great glory. And about 40 days later, the Holy Spirit descended upon the disciples. Flame appeared above their head, and they spoke in new tongues and spoke with such grace and authority and healed many. And the church was established on that day, and the church is the kingdom of Christ on earth. That is the kingdom made without hands. That is the kingdom that Christ was talking about establishing. The church was, of course, persecuted, and it did have to flee. And the temple, as well as the city of Jerusalem, were destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD, fulfilling the last parts of the prophecy that remained. The prophecy in the Olivet Discourse is not about the end times and the second coming. It is about the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem, but the beginning of a new age, the Messianic age, and the foundation of the kingdom of Christ, the church. Having explained all of that, the atheist I was talking to quoted, "This generation shall not pass till they see these things come," and then ridiculed my answer because it's an obvious false prophecy, and I can use mental gymnastics all I want, but it said that this prophecy would be fulfilled in this generation, in the lifetime of the disciples. It was fairly obvious that the atheist did not listen to what I had actually said. He didn't really read my post online. Rather, he just saw me say Jesus was not a false prophet and mention the Olivet Discourse, and then said, "This generation shall not pass," which is supposed to be a smoking gun which defeats my argument, because Jesus promised that this prophecy would be fulfilled within the lifetime of the disciples. That was 2,000 years ago, and it's not yet fulfilled. How do you explain that, Christian? The only problem with using this smoking gun of telling the disciples that this prophecy would be fulfilled within their lifetimes, and it hasn't been because it's been 2,000 years and they're all dead now, is that I told him that the prophecy had already been fulfilled. It's not a prophecy of the end times. It's not a prophecy of the second coming. So how does saying, "This generation shall not pass away," undermine what I've said? Well, the answer is it doesn't. The atheist was just being stupid, which is typical of atheists these days. And it highlights what I've been saying in the last few videos, which I don't know if you're going to get all of because TubeOU has a bizarre intelligence synthetica issue that selectively decides what will and will not show up, which is why I make more than one video on a given topic. It also means that it's harder to create videos for Ramble or The Shoot of Bit that I don't have to self-censor, because I'm busy making 2 or 3 videos on the same topic for this platform. Nevertheless, this highlights the point that I've been making. Here we have an atheist that utterly ignored what I was really saying, and probably didn't read it, just skimmed what I was saying, and it caught his eye that I was saying that this prophecy wasn't false, and he just thought he could bring up the "this generation shall not pass away" part to prove me wrong. And it also reveals why, unless you're like me, you probably shouldn't waste time posting long comments in explanation to atheists because they don't read what you're saying. Of course, I post long responses, but that's because I want to make fun of them for not reading what I've already answered. That, and I'm a bit of a windbag, let's face it, I talk a lot. I am a product of academia, after all, even if I disagree with the way modern academia runs. But it is still rather telling that they think they know all of your arguments and how to debunk them when they really don't. And that's been a problem not just with militant atheists, It's been a problem with everyone, really, to some degree. And our modern culture has exasperated this. We have a very not rational society. It's especially pronounced on the left, though, these days, because the left has embraced that revolutionary spirit where they don't listen to you because you have nothing to say and you're just an oppressor. But it does highlight a problem. Because if militant atheists are unwilling to actually listen to what you're saying and engage in what you're saying, then you really can't do much with them. And it's obvious that when they say they just lack belief and would change their mind with evidence, they're not really being truthful about that. This has never been about them lacking evidence. And it certainly isn't about them lacking belief because they lack evidence. They've decided what is and is not true in advance, and they've only come to ridicule you for being stupid and inferior to them. And they're not going to listen and respond honestly to what you're going to say. And anyone who listens to this who is not a militant atheist should realize that. And realize that it's a problem with the way that they think. As much as they would say otherwise, they keep blaming Christians and talking about how they are perfect examples of Dunning-Kruger and talking about their cognitive biases and cognitive dissonance. They don't deal with their own cognitive biases or their own cognitive dissonance. But they do have it. I know, because when you bring up great evils that various atheist heroes like Christopher Hitchens or Stephen Fry did, they despise you for it. And they call you a liar. But they don't try to look at actual facts that contradict what they're saying. They present no evidence of their own. They claim they just lack belief and no burden of proof. And they'll dismiss any evidence you have. Another conversation I had the same day was a bloke bringing up the usual cobblers about how Noah's flood and the Exodus never really happened. And when I showed him modern evidence for that, not from a Christian site, but from places like the National Center for Science Education and various archaeology departments and historians, who all argue that both of these events at least are based on real events, especially the Exodus, all he did was repeat the claim that there's no evidence that the Exodus happened and that it was fiction. He didn't even address the evidence that I had presented. And that's a problem that atheists have. They don't address the real problems. And they will often simply ridicule you, or, when they start gaining power, removing you. Like they did with me for 7 months. Because Gaggle is run by progressives who are largely atheist and have the same humanist values. That's why atheists are less likely to suffer being excluded from the tube of you. Not to say none of them ever do, but it's rather like the creator of Father Ted. Atheists in the United Kingdom continue to mock, ridicule, and harass Christians. And if you complain, they say that you have the Christian persecution complex. And they don't really do anything about it. Crimes against Christians go unreported or underreported or reported as something that they're not, and are downplayed by the media and by the government, and are not taken seriously even if the crimes are serious. And at the same time, various media outlets are allowed to ridicule Christians as not intelligent, as not rational, as being by goat Ted. You can make jokes at the expense of Christians all you want. You can be as insulting and offensive as you like. and you will not go to prison for it, even if you post these things online. But if a Christian were to mock an atheist in this way, the police will be at their door because they're causing offense. For that matter, the Christian doesn't even have to respond with insults. The Christian can just be critical of the atheist's criticism, saying that it's harsh or unwarranted and point out problems with it. And they can have to explain themselves to the police, perhaps even be arrested. And let's not forget how many go to be arrested for speaking about Christian moral principles in regards to same-sex matching, shall we say, or having physical relations outside of the constraints of marriage. Atheists don't go to jail for ridicule and mockery of Christians, but Christians can go to jail for defending their faith. And the only atheists that I ever hear of that go to jail in the UK now for saying hurty words online are people like the creator of Father Ted. But their infraction was not about how he made fun of Christians. It was because he questioned the high and holy and sacred transgender movement. It's obvious that they have an agenda, and it's obvious that there have been schisms in the secular movement, because the secular movement is a religious movement, even though it claims to not be a religion, being by definition not religion, being neutrality toward religion by definition. It's a religion. And it's had its own schisms, and not every atheist has gone full woke. Some have actually gone anti-social justice warrior. But they all have the same undergirding of the same materialist humanism that comes from the neo-Hegelians of the 19th century and Ludwig Feuerbach. They all have the same humanist vision as presented by Auguste Comte. And they all hold to the Draper-White conflict thesis. It's just different denominations within the secularist religion that fight each other. But even then, they'll say the same things about religion, and especially Christianity. And they won't really listen to you. And that's why it's not really possible at this point to have a civil discussion with them and change their mind. I'm not saying we should then turn to violence. That's never been my answer. But we should be aware that you're going to have to wait until their own defenses are broken down and they're willing to listen to you before you can have a civil discussion. Until then, you just counter what they're saying and point out how fallacious it is in the hopes that they go away. Because even though it is the highest hope that they listen and come to a knowledge of the truth, if they're not listening to what you're saying and not responding to it, that's not really a possibility. I don't have much else to say right now, so I shall take my leave of you. Thank you, God bless, and goodbye.